India's inflation data, which gets reflected in the GDP deflator, that is completely flawed. The presumptions of the government of a revival of private investment and private consumption has not turned out to be true.
There is a problem of unemployment.
If we start with the post-COVID recovery, a lot of people across the ideological spectrum did not agree with the government's propaganda. The Prime Minister himself started beating the drum in international forums also of India having become the fastest growing major economy in the world. In PPP terms, India has been the third largest economy in the world for the past over 10-12 years. So the entire thing, the way the government is projecting its economic achievements or economic, whatever, I think it's all completely misplaced.
Welcome to Janashakti Network. We have with us Prasenjit Bose, economist, activist, and now doing other things with his career. But today we are going to discuss the union budget. Now, the 2025-2026 union budget claimed that the focus would be on Gyan, Gramin, Yuva, Nari, and the Annadata. So that is one aspect of it. The other part of it is that it talked about a national manufacturing mission. The third thing which came through was this, for years anticipated changes in the income tax law. In the income tax, the kind of categories and the kind of relief that people would get. Now, this was supposed to be a path-breaking moment when it would release 1 lakh, this was the claim of the finance minister, Liberalization, that 1 lakh crore would be released. The government was foregoing 1 lakh crore, and 1 lakh crore would therefore be going into the hands of the middle class. And the middle class is this new creation that the Modi government has ushered in through its reforms. The fact is, middle class in India who are taxpayers are only 3% of the population. So this 3% of the population who received 1 lakh crore through the budget, the natural expectation is that the next day, being a Sunday on top of it, everybody would hit the shopping malls, everybody would go to an auto showroom and want to buy a car, at least see what they were going to buy with their money. Nothing happened. The stock market did not react. In fact, the stock market was quite lukewarm to the budget on Saturday and then again on Monday. So, what do you think was the reason for this lack of enthusiasm?
Well, I think that one has to go back to the last budget to understand why the reaction to it was lukewarm. The last budget was presented in July last year, and it was immediately after the Lok Sabha election. So, it was the first budget of the Modi 3.0 government. And the premise of the 3.0, the first budget of the 3.0 government was that the fiscal expansion driven economic growth that we have seen post-COVID, it has already put an enormous strain on the government's finances. Now, that strain has a lot to do with the corporate tax cuts that was given even prior to COVID. So, the government, its policies, fiscal policies are itself to blame for the fiscal strain. But having done that, the debt GDP in our country has increased, as it has increased in most countries in the world, but
not in the same way.
But even before COVID, India has always been a country with a higher than average public debt GDP ratio. if
Yeah.
you compare in the peer group of countries. So now, and it has now increased further. So there is a pressure on the government that to adhere to the to fiscal, conservatism, or whatever, fiscal
Fiscal discipline.
discipline, rectitude, or
Yes.
whatever the term that finance minister has been using is the fiscal consolidation path, which actually means, and I think that that is what the thrust of the last budget was, that now that we have spent so much over the past few years when the private sector was in a recession, now we are withdrawing the stimulus and we are going to close down our fiscal deficit, and it is time for the private sector to step up their own capital expenditure. I'll come back to him later when we talk about employment. But what has the substantially that has not happened.
No.
This expectation has not materialized. So you have not really seen a revival of the private sector capex cycle, on which the entire strategy of the first Modi, the first budget of the third Modi government
Yeah.
was premised on. As a result, what we have seen is that the private sector investment has not grown compared to the past trend, whereas the fiscal stimulus has gone down. So the growth rate has come down. So from 8.2, you
It's
are
now
now at
6.3.
6.3. And in that backdrop, this budget is further
Yes.
cutting down on, in fact, in the current year itself, there is a cut in the capex in terms of the revised estimates. In terms of the future projections, the next financial year, the growth projection itself has been brought down. So
Drastically.
drastically, it means I think the government is now, even the economic survey
Yeah.
is now resigned to the possibility of around 6%
Yeah.
growth rate. And if we take into account the fact that even this growth rate is the expert opinion says that these are overestimates. In for many reasons, these are overestimates, because India's inflation data, which
That's right.
gets reflected in the GDP deflator, that is completely flawed. And even the International Monetary Fund has commented on
I
this.
think the less we say about, or we should actually talk about the data issue and India's
Yeah,
data
the
problems.
short point is that the presumptions of the government of a revival of private investment and private consumption has not turned out to be true. On the top of it, the partly out of its own follies, past follies, partly out of its current compulsions, the government is squeezing the deficit and going in for expenditure cuts. So a combination of all this is leading to growing pessimism in different segments of the economy, and various players of the stakeholders of the economy, and it is also leading to a slowdown, economic slowdown, which is quite pervasive.
See, the one on the one side, you refer to these things. One side is slowdown, the other is inflation, the third is unemployment.
Yeah.
Now, one would have expected that into its third term, the Modi government would have something innovative to offer on all these three heads. Why? Because without the employment and if there is a problem of unemployment, and let us when we can, and in probably another program, discuss the way in which unemployment data is being collected and the periodic labor survey is being put out for if all of us to have a look. But not going into the data issue, there is a problem of unemployment. And along with unemployment, there is another problem that we are seeing is the unorganized sector is going through a further expansion rather than a contraction. And then there is a problem of wages. Wages have remained either stagnant or, in real terms, they may have increased, but in actual terms, they have not increased. They've gone down. So we are now having a problem of unemployment, wages, and along with that, opportunities.
Yeah, so it's a consequence of what is happening from a macroeconomic point of view.
Hmm.
So if you have even when
Hmm.
if we start with the post-COVID recovery,
Hmm.
uh, uh, a lot of people across the ideological spectrum did not agree with the government's propaganda, you can say, or
Absolutely.
its claim that the economic recovery, which basically the Prime Minister himself started beating the drum in international forums also, of India having become the fastest growing major
Economy.
economy in the
Yeah.
world, and we are going to become $5 trillion economy, we are going to become the third largest economy and all that. Actually, see, let us talk a bit about the data issues, because you see, the data is very important.
Okay.
First of all this actually makes very little sense. See, if you can't make international comparisons of GDP in nominal terms, and that too in international dollars, the way to do it is what is called technically in purchasing power parity
Parity.
terms. So there is a alternative GDP series which the IMF, World Bank, everybody uses
Uses.
to make international comparisons of GDP in PPP terms. In PPP terms, India has been the third largest economy in the world for the past over 10-12 years,
That's
maybe
right.
even more, maybe around. I think it was during the UPA era that India had become the third largest
I
economy in
think
the world.
just before 2008.
Third largest. No, no,
Third.
no. Third largest. I think they had become third largest a long time ago. They still continue to be the third largest
Hmm.
economy. But China is the by PPP terms, it is China which is the largest economy in the world. United States is
That's
second.
right.
India is third, and this has been for quite some time now. And the point is, why not? We are the largest population in the world.
That's
So
right.
we should actually be the largest economy in the world. And
Naturally.
if you look at historically, we have been, even during the Mughal era, India was the largest economy in the world, along
Absolutely.
with China. And because and why so? Because even then we were the most populous countries in the world.
True.
So the entire thing, the way the government is projecting its economic achievements or economic, whatever, I think it's all completely misplaced, and it is leading to a lot of confusion within.
Also, strange expectations because
Yeah. So
and the budget does not do anything to address any of this.
well, I think that is, see, the problem with this way of beating the drum about some GDP market, current prices GDP, is that the relationship between that and the actual lived experience
Of
of the people, especially vis-a-vis the in the job market. You just look at the job market. Even when there was a recovery, experts were saying it's a K-shaped recovery.
Hmm.
So your top 10%, and within that the top 1% have done very well. They have recovered, and they have not only recovered, they have actually become even richer and even more kind of powerful compared to the pre-COVID situation. Whereas the bottom 90%, and within that the bottom 50% have actually
their terms of the quality of life has
has
worsened.
deteriorated.
Absolutely.
And that is where the question of wages and employment becomes so important. The link between high economic growth and high living standards of that bottom 50% or the bottom
That's right.
90% is employment. So if your growth is jobless, if your growth does not lead to employment generation, then in any case that growth is not reaching to the majority of the population. It is getting concentrated, the fruits of
That's right.
that growth. Now on the top of it, now there is a downturn and there is a slowdown.
Yeah.
And and the economy, if the official expectation itself is that the economy is going to slow down, so the employment situation is going to even further
That's right. And the
deteriorate.
terms of employment are going
So
to decline.
the wages,
Yeah.
actually what is happening is that in nominal terms, the wages are stagnating. But because of inflation, in real terms, this economic survey of, just one day ahead of the budget, it was presented, and the survey graphically,
Hmm.
it actually has multiple charts to show that there are three categories of workers, the way the labor force survey estimates them. So, the largest category is self-employed, that is over 50%. In fact, almost it has now reached almost 60%, 58%. So, for them, the real earning, the real wages, not the nominal wage adjusted to inflation, the real wage, that real wage for that self-employed section is going down.
Declined.
The regular salaried section, it is going down. And there is a marginal increase. It can be said that it is basically for the casual, the most vulnerable section of the workforce, the poorest of them. For them also, real wages, the casual workers, it has stagnated. I will link it to a combination of the factors, that your unemployment is becoming even worse and your inflation, especially food inflation, a combination of these two are bringing down the real wages, and that is the best indicator of what is happening.
And the budget, and the budget, would you
it will make the situation worse.
Okay.
Absolutely.
How?
First of all, what should have been done? If the wages are going down, you increase the wages. So, the best way to increase the wages is the government has an employment program on which the government makes allocations every year from the union budget.
So, but Narega budget has been slashed.
Exactly. So, that is the whole point. So, the first thing that the government should have done after reading the economic survey, which I am sure the first eyes to glance over that data would be Madam Finance Minister herself. So, after seeing what is happening to the majority of our workers, she should have increased the minimum wage, the wages. And by the way, the wages under Narega in all states, in most states, almost all states, the wages are way below the national floor level minimum wages, which the government itself declares. So, you have almost say 350, 400 rupees per daily wage set as the national floor. If you actually go to look at the NREGA data, the wages are far lower than that.
It's about 250.
Exactly, 250 rupees per day. So, this was an opportunity which she has lost. She should have just increased the hike, across the board hike in NREGA wages, which should, and enhanced allocations
for NREGA
rather than, because if you are basically, they have put a ceiling. So, every year now they are saying 80,000 crore or 85,000 crore. So, every year there is inflation. So, your 80,000 crore gives lower wages, even lower wages, and gives even lesser days of work to the NREGA workers.
That's right.
So, that is one lost opportunity. Now, let us come to the tax cuts. Now, if you want to put more money in the hands of the ordinary people, the way to do it is to cut indirect taxes, because that is the tax which everyone pays. So, there are two indirect taxes which the government should and could have easily.
GST being one big one.
Certainly GST, and especially GST specifically on those commodities which are used by the ordinary people, across the board. They could have brought it down on textiles, leather goods, food,
junk food,
all kinds of
junk food for that matter.
Items of mass consumption.
That's right.
The GST rates, but most importantly, they should have cut the excise duties on petrol and diesel, which are very, very high.
Yes.
So, once supposing had there been a 5 rupees per litre cut in the excise duties on petrol and diesel, it would have had a huge impact on the lives of everybody, especially the ordinary people, and that would have created the purchasing power, which would have generated consumption.
It would have actually had a huge impact on inflation.
Yeah, it would have had a cascading impact on inflation. Just like every hike in petrol and diesel prices causes food inflation, a cut would have relaxed and kind of given some relief to people by bringing down the especially food inflation rate. She did nothing of that. She is giving 1 lakh crore by her estimates relief to. I just want to say that there are several calculations of how many people are paying taxes in our country. The government says 8 lakh or 9 lakh people are filing IT returns. Positive tax.
That's right.
because many people, they pay taxes, and then they just get the whole thing back because they don't cross the threshold.
That's right.
So what happens is that ultimately you can calculate that in various ways. So it is estimated to be between 2.8 to 3.1 crore. Now our population is, our adult population, you can say, I think is around 100 crore, but
Yeah.
our total population has now crossed China. It is 140 crore. So
We don't know, Prasenjit.
yeah, I am going by the official
Yeah,
health ministry
data,
projections.
which
So
is a
that
projection. It's not a data.
so it is not even, if you use 140 crore as the base, then you are actually talking about less than 2% of the population.
That's true.
So and if you are talking about the entire adult population, then it would be at the most 3% of the population. This class, first of all, I refuse to accept by any definition. I think that there are multiple definitions of what a middle class is. There can be an economic definition, there can be an income criteria, there is a sociological definition, there can be in terms of profession. But by whatever manner you define what a middle class is, it is certainly not the top 2% of your population who was the most wealthy and most vocal and most powerful class. So they are an entitled people. So you give them the tax relief. Now it is common sense macroeconomics. We have known this since at least the Keynes-Kaleshki revolution days, that the consumption propensity of the lower income classes are more. So if you are worried about consumption demand, you give more money in the hands of the workers.
And the only way to have done it in India is through the rationalization of GST.
Well, the indirect taxes
Indirect
and also excise duties.
And excise duties.
Or increasing wages.
Or increasing wages.
So if you are not doing that and doing income tax cut, first of all, a lot of that money will not come back to the market. It will basically, people will save more, people will put more money, either in banks or in, your
mutual funds.
Yeah, exactly, in the capital market.
Yeah.
And whatever consumption it leads to, that is called elite consumption. So if people use that to buy more, and that is what is happening to our country's manufacturing sector, because we can't make half of the things that we consume. So then we will be adding to the import bill of our country. We will be importing cars from China and God knows what else, from China, and therefore that tax cut will benefit the employment generation in China rather than benefiting in our country.
This is not strictly a budget question, but there is one question that I would definitely like to ask, because one would have expected that a budget which should sort of be a kind of guiding tool for investors, that should have focused on manufacturing in a way that we become because that's what the whole world expected us to be, the alternative to China as a manufacturing a huge center of manufacturing. Whatever was the de-risking that was happening vis-a-vis China, the place to look at was India. The Niti Aayog report actually goes into this, which says that no, people come, foreign investors come, they look, they see, but they don't invest in India. They go to Vietnam, they go to Taiwan, they go to the Philippines, they go to Indonesia, but they don't invest in India. Now, we have been talking about, and the Modi government over 10 years has been talking about skill development, make in India, and now it says that we are actually going to climb onto the AI, artificial intelligence bandwagon, and go racing and become a top global producer. Do you think that there's anything at all in the budget which gives us to believe that the government has actually set the milestones going forward?
Well, there are two aspects to this. So, excuse me. I think that this whole effort, one can talk. They have given, every year they have come up with new branded and rebranded. They kept on
Package and
package revision. But basically, the whole point from the economic point is very simple.
Hmm.
India's growth rate has certainly seen a very significant acceleration in the past three and a half decades. But unlike China and unlike many other other developing or emerging economies, our transition has been mainly based on the services sector.
That's right.
Our manufacturing has not developed to the extent it should, and our export performance has always been dismal, and it continues to remain so. So they started with this Make in India initiative, and after a lot of trying, it has failed. And because it has failed, now there are it has been packaged and repackaged, and God knows how many more names we will hear about it. The fact of the matter is that it has failed, and manufacturing as a share of India's GDP has actually shrunk under this government. And post COVID, there is no major revival in any of the manufacturing sectors. Why it is so, I think is a very serious question, and I
think we can leave that for
we can
another
we can leave it for another day.
But I think that
the budget, yeah. So if you come to the budget, let me put it this way: you are asking me whether there is anything in the budget which addresses this problem.
Yeah.
I would say that what is actually not in the budget, which should have been in the budget, which actually is very eloquent, that absence. What is the absence? The real big bang announcement of the last budget was, and it was on the top of the budget speech. If you just go back to the Nirmala Sitharaman's first budget speech of this government in 24-25 budget, she started by announcing a Prime Minister's package for skill development and employment.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, I think, and there is not even a single word in this budget. It's just not even been a year. It's just 7 or 8 months.
That's right.
You have announced, and they have announced a 2 lakh crore outlay for a period of 5 years, just in July.
That's right.
And they said that every year we are going to provide employment to 80 lakh, either employment or
apprenticeship.
Some kind of internship or apprenticeship.
Well, apprenticeship is a Congress word, internship is a Modi word.
Whatever. So basically, some kind of a training for skill development.
That's right. And they're going to receive a stipend during that.
Yeah. So and that stipend is going to be funded by the state exchequer.
Yeah.
So it was a huge program.
Yep.
So a lot of people were skeptical about it, whether it will work, whether it will not work. There were these, people made fun of it because the numbers, when one broke it down, it was coming to, if you look at the top 500 companies, which they said that the top 500 companies in our country are going to provide apprenticeship to these people. So per company, the number was per year higher was coming to some huge amount of 20,000 plus figures. So people started saying that where are you going to get them to sit? You don't even have enough space to recruit that many people. So I think that the fact that nothing has been said in the budget speech and in the implementation document of the past budget, they are saying it's still under discussion with the CII.
Yeah.
So only with the CII. So it is a negotiation between the CII and the government. So one can understand that the CII has said that drop the idea.
The government, from all the statements that one can read by the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister, seems to be in a state of denial about poverty, about immiserization, about unemployment, and the general sort of distress that is there amongst the population. One indication is, of course, the wages issue, which you have extensively discussed. The other one is, how then is this budget, which is a full budget of the Modi 3.0 government, does it set a route from where the budget sort of gives the push to make things change. Do you see that?
Yeah, of course I see it, but I think that it is a regressive change that this
Okay.
budget, because see, the
So
point
that they're
is
moving backwards, right?
backwards, or well, in a direction which is going to make the rich richer and the poor poorer, if one just
Okay.
can put it in simple terms. India already counts among the, in terms of inequality, has been increasing in all the major economies in the world in the past 30-40 years. I think Thomas Piketty and his colleagues in the World Inequality Lab has brought out that data in such a graphic manner that there cannot be any debate about it anymore. And India, within those, if you look at the top 20 countries, top G20 economies, so on, they are among the worst. And I think Russia is the worst, and then you have India. So you have the top 1% owning over almost 60%, 58 I think is
Yeah.
their latest estimate, of the wealth of this country, and the top 10% owning almost over 80% of the wealth of this country. So we have now reached this obnoxious level of wealth and income, inequality of wealth and income. This budget gives a tax concession to the rich, and it, rather than expanding welfare expenditure, compresses it, especially as a percentage of GDP. They are compressing demand by compressing the fiscal deficit. So this is a budget which is going to lead to slower growth. It will lead to more unemployment. In terms of unemployment, I just want to say that in India, the employment measurement is a completely unscientific, it is done in an unscientific manner. And the unemployment measure in an economy like India, which experts have been debating this issue for a long time, it's a dual economy. So there is a huge difference between an employment in the a government sector, a regular employment in the government sector,
Organized sector.
and the organized, private organized sector, corporate sector, or the organized sector, and the informal sector, which is populated by mostly women and the other socially marginalized groups like the scheduled castes, the scheduled tribes, the minorities, and women within those communities. There is a distress driven shift of them, which is showing in
The increase in
increased labor force participation.
women's participation.
And strangely, I think how delusional our policymakers have become, that they are mistaking this as something which is leading to a progressive transition in our labor market. A progressive transition would have created more organized sector jobs and increased the share of women in the organized sector. They are completely silent on that. What is the data on what is the representation of women in our organized sector? It may have increased, but what is the rate of increase? What is the comparison with other peer group countries? They are talking in terms of, and we are having a situation where self-employment is growing. Within the self-employed category, unpaid labor, and especially unpaid, we know who give their unpaid labor to our society, especially in a context of a developing economy like India.
And a rural.
They are the rural women. They go and work in their family farms. They run their family shops. So their real earnings, they are unpaid. Their family income, their real incomes
Are declining.
Are declining, and the government budget does not address that. They could have done a lot to ameliorate that situation. NREGA would have been a good opportunity to do so, and they are giving tax breaks to that top 10%, top 1%, and top 0.1%, top 0.001%. So this is a government which actually is working, and I think that they are taking pages after pages, or I don't know. I mean, whether it is Mr. Modi who is taking pages out of Mr. Trump's book, or it is the other way around. But increasingly, the government is actively creating a plutocracy. and replacing our democracy with a plutocracy where all policies are meant for the billionaires, for the rich, and the ordinary people are just left for themselves,
To fend for
to
themselves.
fend for themselves. And when it comes to election, you pit one section against the other in the name of religion and caste, and do divisive politics to come back to power. So, unfortunately, if we really want an alternative trajectory which reduces inequality, we also have to think in terms of an alternative politics which provides primacy, which accords primacy to the livelihoods of the ordinary people, not the top 1%, but the bottom 50%, the bottom 90%.
Which would mean a shift away from what the Modi Sarkar has patted itself and told the world about in terms of its achievements, infrastructure, roads, highways, bridges, to and redoing things in the rural sector where they have made a mess because of their mishandling of the farmers' demands, which is clear through their 3 black farm laws. So, would you agree, and let us be brief on this, would you agree that this budget actually has a bias which is against the majority of the rural population, who are not going to be in a position to take advantage of the incentives that are there, and that this government's claim that they have this umbrella package program which they are going to unveil, that is going to not change the way in which the rural economy and the inequalities and the distress in the rural economy.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. That I think that, now this government is, is going to be 11 years old
Yes.
now, this regime. And I think that any budget now should not be seen in isolation. It should be seen as a part of their overall economic thinking, their overall economic strategy, which comes out from these successive budgets.
Right.
And they have abolished the planning commission, so they don't have a plan. So, but they do have a plan, which one can see if one looks at the series of budgets and overall makes an assessment of what their direction has been, or trajectory has been, or whether there have been shifts in emphasis and trajectories and things like that. And I think that by now the conclusion should be very clear that they are doing more harm than good as far as the Indian economy and the majority of the Indian people are concerned. Their main interest is to serve their purpose is to serve the interest of the handful of the most powerful and the richest people of our country. So, I think it's a big question for our democracy, whether the people will see through the game that is being played, and they will vote accordingly.
Thank you, Prasenjit.
Thank you so much.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to stay updated with the latest incidents. Hit the bell icon to never miss an update. We will see you next time with more news that matters. Stay informed, stay safe.